knife when you're too close, too close. It scars forever when someone you called a friend shows you the truth can be so cold, so cold. I wipe the dirt off your name with the shirt off my back. I thought that you'd do the same, but you didn't do that. Said I'm the one who's wanted for all the fights you started. You knew the house was burning down. I had to get out. You led your saints and sinners and fed them lies for dinner. You knew the house was burning down. And look at you now. And look at you now. How do you sleep at night? No one to hide behind. Betrayed every alibi you had. You had, you had every chance to make amends. Yet you got drunk on bitterness, and you still claim that you didn't say that you said I'm the one who's wanted for all the fights you started. You knew the house was burning down. I had to get out.
Bogone bupirima regaele morena kawena rega ema ratswarana morena ore khoge leseding re waar die wilgers welig spruit, doringboom sy skadu sprei, soos ons groei in kundigheid, mag U ons vlei. Sien ons hoe hier lei met die hand, laat U sien rus oor ons land. Three strong streams united flow, Africa stands proud and tall. As we learn, we trust, we know God is in control. Bless us, O Lord, guide us with grace. May Northwest be blessed always. Bless us, O Lord, see
The Dean of the Faculty of Health Sciences, Directors of various departments of pharmaceutical chemistry, colleagues, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, we are gathered here today to support and celebrate Northwest University and its commitment to academic excellence and this inaugural lecture of Professor Richard B. Beteck. An inaugural lecture is a significant moment for academics, a moment to pause and reflect on the challenging yet exciting academic journey thus far, and to feel proud saying to yourself, yes, I've made it. This moment is reminiscent of Julius Caesar's famous quote, Vini, vidi, vici. I came, I saw, and I conquered. I am extremely ecstatic that you have chosen to be part of this solemn ancient ceremony. And tonight, as shown in the title of this lecture, we hope to be inspired by something important and new. We can no longer hold on to the sensation of wanting to know what these magic bullets are. Good evening, and a very warm welcome to all of you attending this special occasion. Indeed, it is an honor and privilege for me to welcome you to Professor Beteck's inaugural lecture titled Magic Bullets, What They Are and How They Are Made. I stand here in triple capacity to welcome you this evening. As a colleague, as a friend and brother, and most importantly, as an alumnus of the prestigious Northwest University. Indeed, it feels good to be home. I will not waste your time dwelling on Professor Beteck's academic prowess, as this might lead me to give another inaugural lecture before the real lecture, which brings us here this evening. But to make my speech very short, I've known Professor Beteck for over 9 years. We met in 2016 when he first registered for his doctorate at NW. Since then, we've been very close, and he is hardworking, polite, and very ambitious. During our student days, I remember inviting him along with other Cameroonian friends on Fridays for a drink at a renowned Dragonstein, and he will say, sorry, I have work to do at the lab. And I will reply, take a break, it's Friday. A friend often mocked him by saying, all you need to do is to set your reactions and check it the next day to see if it makes a popping sound or changes color. And we will all laugh about it. Then I immediately realized that Professor Beteck is a goal-getter and a disciplined person, not the least that we were not disciplined. In retrospect, 9 years seems like yesterday when we were playing soccer, having a braai, discussing global politics, research, publications, sharing memories of late-night study sessions, and celebrating small victories, though we still engage in these conversations and activities. And now, Professor Beteck, look at you, standing here in Europe and ready to deliver your lecture of a lifetime. I must say that tonight's lecture truly reflects your hard work, dedication, brilliance, perseverance, and above all, your pursuit to acquire and share knowledge. I am immensely proud of you and your accomplishments, and so is the Faculty of Health Sciences. Professor Beteck, I want you to know that tonight's lecture is not just a milestone in your academic journey, but also a celebration of your passion for science, pharmaceutical chemistry, and your dedication to knowledge. I am confident that this lecture will be inspiring and informative, offering valuable insight into your specialized research area. Today, we are all eager to learn from you how these magic bullets are developed. Dear colleagues, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, it is my distinct pleasure to introduce to you Professor Beteck, who holds the prestigious position of a full professor in pharmaceutical chemistry at Northwest University and has dedicated his career into sharing knowledge and mentoring others. Thank you for joining us today.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Avi Kotze, the Executive Dean of the Faculty of Health Sciences, and it's really an honor to do a welcoming at this inauguration ceremony of Professor Richard Beteck from the Center of Excellence for Pharmaceutical Sciences in the Faculty of Health Sciences at the Northwest University. A special word of welcome to Prof. Sonia Swanepoel, Deputy Vice-Chancellor, Community Engagement and Campus Operations on the Mafeking campus, who's also our main functionary this evening. It is really an honor, Prof. Sonia, to have you here, and we deeply appreciate all your support, your loyalty over many years, your dedication and friendship to this faculty and its staff members. Welcome, Dr. Jean-Claude Ashuken, who opened the ceremony for us. You've said a couple of very nice things. It was really very nice listening to you, and we are extremely grateful that you can also be here as a friend of Richard tonight. I also would like to welcome members of the Faculty Management Committee of the Faculty of Health Sciences, Prof. Janetta Du Plessis, our Deputy Dean Research and Innovation in the Faculty of Health Sciences, and she don't have much more inaugurations to do, but I guess she will get some invitations in future as she retires at the end of the year. Janetta, a special word of welcome to you. Prof. Jan Steenekamp, the School Director of the School of Pharmacy in the Faculty of Health Sciences, Prof. Harau Saisi, Director of the Department of Science and Innovation at Northwest University National Platform for Preclinical Drug Development, also hosted in the faculty. Prof. Lesetja Legoabe, the Research Director of a Center of Excellence for Pharmaceutical Sciences in the faculty, and this is the entity in which Prof. Richard is doing his research. I think it's also a big moment for you, Lesetja, because I know that you collaborate very closely. You and Richard in your research, so also a good milestone for you in the entity. Congratulations with that. Prof. Andries Monieki, Research Director of Physical Activity, Sport and Recreation, which is also a research entity in the faculty. Professor Petra Bester, Research Director for the Africa Unit for Transdisciplinary Health Research in the Faculty of Health Sciences. Prof. Anita Wessels, who's the Director of a Center for Pharmaceutical and Biomedical Services. And then Prof. Wayne Towers, Head of a Health Sciences Ethics Office for Research, Training and Support in the faculty. Also a word of welcome to you, Prof. Wayne. And I trust that you are speeding up all the applications that Prof. Richard is sending in so that he can produce even better in future. Welcome to also all the other staff members of a Center of Excellence for Pharmaceutical Sciences, a center in which Prof. Richard worked, and all his colleagues and collaborators. In particular, also a word of welcome to his current postgraduate students, his postdoctoral fellows, and you will hear when I read his CV that he has many of them, and other staff members of the university which are present tonight. Also a very special word of welcome to collaborators, friends and family abroad who are following this event tonight via virtual access. We are glad that we are able to do that and that you can share in this joyous occasion with us. So you are very welcome. Then to the near people of Prof. Richard, and I must say, Richard, I had to look twice to see that it's Richard sitting there. I'm so used to see him in a laboratory coat. When I met him in the corridors, always running, very quick, you know. Very special guy, very humble guy. something, Richard, that I always see, very humble but always busy. So a true academic. His wife, Dr. Sweetness Beteck, Sweetness, if he didn't at least give you funding for a new outfit tonight, you must come and have a word with me afterwards so that we can make some deductions. And then from his salary in the next couple of months, we will take a decent amount so that we can make sure that you get something nice. Maybe a second pair also can be due, but you are very welcome here. And then also his brother-in-law, Mr. Nicholas Makamu, and Pastor Ronnie Matras, a friend of a family. Welcome also to the representative of the Netibang community, Mr. George Ifondu Ayuk. It now gives me great pleasure to introduce to you our special guest of this evening, Prof. Richard Beteck, and I request that he join me for introducing him to you. Richard, please. Richard Mabi Beteck, born in 1988 at Netibang Village, Manuyo Division, the English-speaking part of Cameroon, is the ninth and last child of a late Mr. Nkem Clement Beteck and Mrs. Christina Inaugural Beteck. He began his education at Government Primary School, Sumbutintu, where he obtained the first school leaving certificate, FCLS, in 2000. From 2000 to 2005, he attended Government High School Tinto and earned the General Certificate of Education, or GCE, ordinary level, excelling in both arts and science subjects, including history, geography, economics, human, biology, chemistry, biology, physics, mathematics, and additional mathematics. And you can hear from this that he's really an all-rounder. To bring science and all the social sciences together, it means it's a special person who understands all these things. Between 2005 and 2017, he studied at the Cameroon College of Arts and Science, Kumba, where he obtained the GCE at advanced level in science with subjects including chemistry, biology, physics, mathematics, and further mathematics. From 2007 to 2010, Richard pursued the Bachelor of Science, or BSc degree, in biochemistry of the University of Buea in Cameroon. Upon completion, he enrolled in a Master of Science, MSc, program in biochemistry at the same university. However, he later discontinued this program after being awarded the prestigious Research Chemist Scholarship, which enabled him to pursue an MSc in medicinal chemistry at the University of Eastern Finland. He completed this degree in 2013. In 2016, he received his PhD from the Northwest University here at the Potchefstroom campus in South Africa under the mentorship of the very famous Professor Richard Haynes. From 2017 to March 2019, he served as a postdoctoral fellow at Rhodes University under the guidance of Professor David Kanayi. In April 2017, he married his lovely wife, Sweetness Jabulili Beteck. Richard returned to Northwest University here at the Potchefstroom campus in April 2019 as a senior lecturer. His academic career progressed steadily with promotions to associate professor in 2023 and full professor in 2025. In recognition of his research contributions, he was awarded the National Research Foundation Y2 rating in 2021. It's very clear that he excelled very quickly in his academic career. So that means that there's something special, Richard, that you're going to tell us tonight, how you managed to do that. To date, Prof. Richard Beteck has successfully supervised 13 master's degrees and 6 PhD students and has mentored 6 postdoctoral research fellows. He currently leads a dynamic research group comprising 7 master's degrees, 1 PhD student, and another 2 postdoctoral fellows. You see, he's clever. He used postdoctoral fellows. Lesson for us to learn. He has authored over 50 publications in international peer-reviewed journals, including 20 articles in top-tier or quintile 1 journals, more than 30 in journals with an impact factor above 3, which is high for medicinal chemistry. In addition, he has delivered numerous oral presentations at both national and international scientific conferences. Prof. Beteck has secured competitive research funding from several prestigious sources, and I'm not going to name the amounts, but it includes the Northwest University Faculty of Health Sciences, our National Research Foundation, the South African Medical Research Council also. He regularly serves as both internal and external examiner for theses and dissertations, and is an active peer reviewer for several high-impact journals, including the ACS Medicinal Chemistry, ChemMedChem, and the European Journal of Medicinal Chemistry. His contributions have been recognized through several awards. In 2021, he received the Most Productive Emerging Researcher Award from the Faculty of Health Sciences. In 2022, he was a runner-up for Best Oral Presentation at the Academy of Pharmaceutical Sciences of South Africa Conference, and in 2023, he was again recognized as runner-up for the Most Productive Emerging Researcher in the faculty. Prof. Beteck has established a broad network, and I'm not going to mention them, of national and international collaborations with renowned experts in fields complementary to his research, of which he will tell us a little bit more later, further enhancing the impact and reach of his scientific work. I think you will all agree with this very short summary that this is truly a remarkable academic record for such a young man and an excellent achievement. And with this, ladies and gentlemen, we will now hand over the academic ware to Prof. Richard and invite him to deliver his inaugural lecture with the title Magic Bullets, What They Are and How They Are Made. I don't hope they are flying towards me. Congratulations from my side, Richard. We are proud of you, and we hope you enjoy this very special occasion and evening. It's a once in a lifetime, as I've already told you in my office once or twice when we were discussing the arrangements of this. Enjoy this. Congratulations.
Good evening, everyone, and once again, thanks for coming. Like I've been introduced, my name is Richard B. Beteck. So today I will be giving you a talk on magic bullet, what they are, and how they made. So the content of my work, I will briefly talk about infectious diseases and the evolution of treatment, on how treatment for infectious diseases have evolved to what we know today, and the concept of magic bullet, what they are, how they prepared, and the procedures that are used in making magic bullet. From there, I will take you on how we've used the stated procedures with the hope of finding potential magic bullet for diseases that affect us, including tuberculosis, neglected tropical diseases like sleeping sickness, Zika disease, and commonly acquired hospital bacterial infections. So, infectious diseases affect all forms of life, including humans, animals, and plants. They basically caused by the presence of other organisms on the affected parties. With respect to human infectious diseases, they are caused by other organisms which include bacteria, viruses, fungi, parasites. From time immemorial, from when man was created on earth, we came with infectious diseases. So we hear, for example, in the Bible, they said 5,000 or 3,000 years ago, Jesus cured people of leprosy. Leprosy is an infectious disease that is caused by Mycobacterium lepra. That shows you how infectious diseases have been with us for quite too long. These diseases have greatly affected the different phases of human civilization and progression. For example, you hear of the plague of Anten, the Black Death, anthrax. During these diseases, you have almost 40 or 50% of the world population wiped out by these diseases. Even though these diseases have been with us from time immemorial, they are still a big challenge that we face. They are still a challenge to our own very existence, a big challenge to even our own economy. We saw that with COVID-19 that just occurred. So presently, you see that almost 10 million people die every year from infectious diseases, and almost a quarter, 25% of those casualties occur in our own very continent, the African continent. So if infectious diseases have been with us for this long time, obviously humans have had several ways to try to help themselves out from these issues. Several practices have been tried by humans, but I would just want to put a few that highlight or kind of relate to what we do. So one of the most prevalent strategy that has been used by humans is traditional medicine. And in traditional medicine, the most common strategy has been herbal medicine. So in herbal medicine, what humans do here is that they try to make a concoction of different plants or different plant parts with the hope of curing themselves with from infectious disease. Other strategies have also been included using a concoction of different insects, including scorpions, spiders, and even ants. Humans have also tried to use even animal waste, including urine and dung, with the hope of curing themselves from infectious disease. So traditional medicine has been practiced for quite too long in different ways and different strategies. Even up to now, traditional medicine is still being used in the form of herbal medicine. But after a long period of traditional medicine, there were too many confusions and too many things happening. So there came a time when the scientific community was like, okay, there should be a systematic way of trying to get things done. And that came out with the beginning of the period of evidence-based medicine. So especially around the 18th century, that is when the evidence-based medicine approach was born. Several strategies were also experimented here, but I would just like to highlight on two that are a little bit associated to what we do. So one of those strategies that had success was abiosis. So during abiosis, the concept here was that it was already known that infectious diseases were caused by germs. So they developed a concept that for you to eliminate germ, you have to use germ. So if you need to catch a thief, you need to use a thief. So what happens there was that if you became sick with an infectious disease, the practice was to catch germs, then inoculate the person sick with these germs. So with the hope that the germs will consume the germ causing, the catcher germs are going to consume the germs causing the disease. This practice was very successful. It was actually led by a very renowned scientist at that time, Louis Pasteur, and it was successful in the treatment of anthrax, which was also a big challenging health problem at the time. Although the concept there was germ-consuming germs, we now know very well that the catcher germs, which largely were bacteria, produced small molecules which inhibited the growth of the disease-causing pathogen. Another strategy that gave great success and built the foundation for current medicine is the dye therapy. Around the 1900, the textile industry in Germany was growing and growing bigger. The textile industry relied on making dyes to color their different textiles. So you use dyes to produce the different colors that we see in the skin. So a renowned scientist at that time, Paul Ehrlich, used the influence of these dyes, experimented one dye at a time on infected animals. And through this experimentation, he identified tryphan red as a treatment for sleeping sickness. Sleeping sickness at that time was a death sentence. It was a big challenge in the German African colonies. So the German at that moment needed something that they can use to enable them work with the Africans within the African colonies. Through this experimentation, he also identified civastatin, which was successful in curing syphilis. At the moment, syphilis was a big public health issue. It had no cure. So that was the very first effective cure for the treatment of syphilis. So through his experimentations, he came out with the idea of magic bullet for the very first time. So the argument here was, instead of humans relying on trial and error, which has been the order of the day with the hope of curing themselves from infectious diseases, humans can, with reason, build something that can help them eliminate invading pathogens that are causing diseases. The scenario put forward was that of, if you have a snake in your kitchen, you're not going to burn the kitchen because you have a snake in it. You're not going to throw bullets from a gun all over the kitchen because you have a snake in it. The obvious strategy you are going to do is, because you have to look at the snake, locate where the snake is, then fire a bullet from the gun to eliminate the snake specifically without destroying any other thing in the kitchen. Just like a poisonous snake in the kitchen, a bacteria or fungi or virus in the system in your blood, we definitely need something that can act as a bullet to eliminate just the bacteria in the blood or the fungi in the blood without killing anything in blood, nor killing humans themselves. That came up with the concept of magic bullet. So rationally, what are magic bullets? These are small molecules that are rationally made to effectively eliminate a disease-causing pathogen without having negative effect on the surrounding human cells, nor having effect on the overall human health. So that is magic bullet for you. So now we have the concept of reasons. How do we make magic bullet? Like Elish already argued, we're not going to rely more on trial and error, but we have to go with the approach of reason. So it must be 1 + 1 is 2. We're not going to say, okay, let's just play around and see whatever we get. So ideally, to make magic bullet, we have to start with a small molecule. Start with a small molecule, then chemically modify the small molecule to produce other small molecules that look like our starting molecule, but they differ from our starting molecule with just smaller changes. And these changes must be systematic and consistent in nature. With the advancement in the field now, we're no longer starting directly with humans, as was done with Louis Pasteur, or starting directly with animals, as was done with Paul Ehrlich. So the next advancement is that we already know what pathogens are responsible for the diseases of interest. So we culture those pathogens in test tubes, establish the growth of those pathogens, establish that these pathogens are growing on the step. We know that they are growing. Then next, we apply our rationally made molecules onto these pathogens to see if they inhibit the growth of this pathogen and to what extent do they inhibit the growth of these pathogens. We measure the growth, the degree to which this growth has been inhibited. The measurement can take different forms. Minimum growth inhibition, minimum growth concentration. So now we do the measurement, then associate this measurement to the respective structures that we've made. And from there, we are able to see what chemical structure contribute better to growth inhibition. For example, we can sorry for that, please. Okay, for example, we can start with a small molecule like A, then make other small molecules that look like A but closely resemble A with just smaller changes. So we can say, for example, we introduce halogens to the auto position of A, and that will give us B, C, and D. These molecules, they all look the same, but they only differ with the halogen at a particular position, a specific position. So now, let's say we've generated a series of A to D, And we want to see to what extent do they inhibit the growth of, let's say, Mycobacterium tuberculosis. We apply all of these molecules to the Mycobacterium tuberculosis. And we measure the growth inhibition. And for example, we see we get compound A having a growth inhibition against Mycobacterium tuberculosis of 100 micromolar, while compound C has a growth inhibition of 1 micromolar. So obviously what we see here is that compound C has a better growth inhibition than compound A. And the difference between compound A and C is that compound C has a chlorine. So here we can clearly state that the presence of a chlorine here gives better growth inhibition than compound A not having a chlorine. So in our next cycle of trying to generate compounds that have better growth inhibition against Mycobacterium tuberculosis, we are going to start with compound C, no longer compound A. We make molecules that closely look like compound C, but they differ from compound C in a systematic way. And that we can go by making C, C1, C2, C3. We evaluate again this set of molecules for growth inhibition against our pathogen of interest. We continue this cycle until we get molecules that have the desired pharmacological activity that we are looking for. Besides the pharmacological activity that we are looking for our molecules to effectively eliminate our pathogen of interest, we are also interested in other properties. The molecule must have other properties that are commonly referred to as drug-like properties. So, for example, let's say we have a bacterial infection that is located deep within the lung tissues. And we so far have experimented with that bacteria just in vitro. The activity that we see in vitro might not represent what we see in vivo because we need other properties other than the pharmacological activity. Let's take a typical example where we have tuberculosis caused by a bacterium in the lungs. It's located in the lungs, and we want to use a small molecule wherein you can just swallow in the mouth, then we get our pathogen out. When you swallow the small molecule, it goes to the stomach. From the stomach, it has to dissolve in the water found in the stomach. And from there, it creates a concentration gradient where it can diffuse through the stomach walls to find itself in blood. In blood, it gets pumped, circulated through the body, diffused through the different biological membranes until it reaches the lungs where the bacteria is. That is how you get your bacteria eliminated. So let's get a situation where the molecule goes into the stomach and it doesn't dissolve in the water found in the stomach. Obviously, we are not going to get sufficient quantity of that molecule in blood. And if sufficient quantity of the molecule is not found in blood, we're not going to get it to the target where we want it to eliminate our pathogen. So if the molecule dissolves in the water found in the stomach, but is still unable to pass through the stomach walls, we're still going to get a situation where we don't have sufficient quantity of it in blood, and hence we will not get it reaching where we want it to do the job. So if we have this molecule dissolving in the water found in the stomach, it passes through the stomach walls and we have sufficient quantity of it in blood. Upon reaching the blood, it breaks down within 2 minutes, meaning over time we're not going to get it to reach the target where we want it to eliminate the bacteria. So besides optimizing for the activity that we want, the growth inhibition, we need our molecules to get the property where it should be able to dissolve in water, pass through the stomach walls as well as different body compartments, stay stable enough in blood to reach the target where we want it to do the job. We do not want molecules that are going to stay in blood and become permanent visitors. No, but they should be stable enough to do the job, then get out of the body. So in summary, how are magic bullets or drug substrate made? They are made through iterative, systematic chemical modification to generate compounds that have the desired pharmacological activity as well as the desired drug-like properties to be able to eliminate our pathogen of interest. So that is the simple way how magic bullets are made. So now I would like to take you how we've used these simple stated procedures that I've just highlighted to you in trying to find potential drug substrate for the diseases that affect us. So like I said before, our continent is rife with too many infectious diseases, notorious of which include tuberculosis, malaria, HIV, sleeping sickness. For most of these diseases, there exist no vaccines out there. So their treatment, control, and prevention relies solely on the use of small molecules. The worst case scenario that we're facing so far is that for most of these diseases that has been controlled for some time, we're having a situation where the pathogen causing this disease have evolved just like humans change behavior. They've also changed their own behavior in a way that the drugs that we have in the market are no longer effective to them. So what we are left with is no other option but to get engaged in trying to identify those magic bullets that will help us eliminate these pathogens. One of those diseases that is of concern to us, because it's a big challenge to our continent and our country in particular, is tuberculosis. This is a bacterial infection that is a problematic one, transmitted through air. Tuberculosis currently causes ill health to more than 10 million people every year, and every year leads to the death of more than 1.8 million people. At the moment, it is a bigger problem, a bigger health problem than malaria, HIV, or even COVID-19. The treatment for tuberculosis requires TB patients to take at least 4 drugs in large quantities for a period of at least 6 months. This treatment at the moment is a big challenge on its own because the patients, after taking the drugs for some time, let's say after 1 month, they get tired and they intentionally abandon the treatment. Or if they don't get tired, they forget. It's not easy to do something routinely for that long period of time. So this practice on its own of people abandoning the treatment or forgetting to take treatment has led to the formation of multi-drug resistant forms of tuberculosis. This form of tuberculosis on its own is very difficult to treat than the normal tuberculosis, and it kills more people than the normal tuberculosis. So the research community on its own is bringing several strategies on how we can overcome this problem of tuberculosis. And one of those strategies is that we have to look for potential new molecules that work in a way that is completely different from the current drugs out there in the market. So we have to try to inhibit new drug targets within Mycobacterium tuberculosis. And one of those drug targets is DPRE1. There is an essential enzyme that is only found in Mycobacterium tuberculosis. It's not found in humans. This enzyme produces arabinogalactan, which is a very important polymer that Mycobacterium tuberculosis uses to form a very thick cell wall around itself. With this thick cell wall, Mycobacterium tuberculosis can resist any drug or any molecule from entering it. It can also resist even the immune cells, macrophages, where it infects. So, but since the biggest weapon that Mycobacterium tuberculosis has to fight is the cell wall, it means if you inhibit DPRE1, you're going to get rid of Mycobacterium tuberculosis very easily. So to that effect, we want to develop new molecules that inhibit DPRE1. And we started with a small molecule like this. So we carried out iterative synthesis around this molecule and generated another molecule, PSD 2020. It has sub-micromolar activity against whole cell Mycobacterium tuberculosis, and it also inhibits DPRE1. This molecule, from observation, is very good in every aspect of drug discovery. It's very small, it has polar groups, but the biggest challenge with this molecule is that it doesn't dissolve in water. It has poor aqueous solubility. What that means is that if we're going to take it through the mouth, we're not going to get sufficient quantity of it in blood, and we're definitely not going to kill Mycobacterium tuberculosis in vivo. So our challenge here was we need to make new molecules that we can improve the aqueous solubility. So we, first of all, reasoned that although this molecule is small, it's very compact, so you have like the 3 aromatic ring all too close together. So the first strategy was to remove the benzene ring and introduce new groups that we can split the pi-pi stack in there. And with that strategy, we came up with QN 2021A by just introducing the CF3 there to the benzene ring. And by just flipping the CN3 and the nitro group around, we got this kind of potent molecule with sub-micromolar activity and very soluble. But the biggest challenge here also is that this compound has poor metabolic stability. So if you introduce it into blood, it's going to break down within 15 minutes. Hence, you can't cure people with this because it can't reach the lungs over time. So what we have to do here is try to convert the ester, which we think can break down very fast, to introduce amide, which we know they are metabolically stable. And that gave us better result because we got several compounds that had sub-micromolar activity as well as better metabolic stability. One of the compounds here of interest to us is PSD 2022. It is important because it has activity against the normal Mycobacterium tuberculosis as well as the multi-drug resistant form of Mycobacterium tuberculosis, meaning it can cure all forms of tuberculosis. It has also better metabolic stability. So even after 30 minutes in the presence of the enzyme that break down drugs, we still have more than 50% of these compounds present. The biggest challenge, however, here remains this compound has poor aqueous solubility. So currently, we still engage in this battle of trying to solve that problem. So this project is still ongoing. Besides inhibiting novel drug targets within Mycobacterium tuberculosis, another strategy that can overcome the multi-drug resistant issue is to concurrently inhibit novel drug target as well as overcoming the virulent factors that Mycobacterium tuberculosis uses to challenge the immune cells. And one of the virulent factors that Mycobacterium tuberculosis uses is iron. This is an essential macronutrient that Mycobacterium tuberculosis uses to multiply, grow, and even to infect macrophages. So we've experimentally shown that iron chelators that are found in the market can inhibit the growth of Mycobacterium tuberculosis in vitro, that is in test tubes. But the biggest challenge with this is that we can use those molecules because they are too hydrophilic. Mycobacterium tuberculosis reside in the lungs, which is within the deep fatty tissues of the lungs. It also forms fatty tissues around itself. So you can use something that is hydrophilic to reach there. So our approach here has been to physically examine the minimum chemical units that are needed to chelate iron, then see how we can just build molecules where we can just select just the minimum chemical unit, incorporate them to more drug-like molecules, and see whatever we get from there. So a look at compound 1 to 3, those are ion chelators, and those are the red cycle shows you the minimum chemical unit that is needed to chelate iron. So you definitely need bidentate ligands to chelate iron. So we selected one of those units, which is the tyrosine carbazate, the chemical unit encircled in red in compound 3. So we constructed new compound classes that are lipophilic enough, then attach our tyrosine carbazate there to give us RD series A. Evaluated them for growth inhibition against Mycobacterium tuberculosis, and surprisingly, we got no activity. So we probably thought maybe the issue here could be that we don't have flexibility enough. So we introduced flexibility to those molecules, but we still didn't get activity. Then later, we introduced the ion chelating moiety group to the molecules, and we got these kind of compound classes. They had low micromolar potent activity against Mycobacterium tuberculosis, and they also have activity against Mycobacterium ulceran. Mycobacterium ulceran is a bacterium that causes Brunelli ulcer, a condition where you get a patch of your skin on the feet or legs decaying. So after establishing that these compounds, they are ion chelators, and they have activity against Mycobacterium tuberculosis and ulceran, next was to see which target or metabolic pathway within this organism do they inhibit. So we evaluated them against different CRISPR strains of Mycobacterium tuberculosis, and we found that these molecules, they have greater than 4-fold increase in activity against RGB CRISPR strains. This on its own highlight that these molecules, they inhibit arginine biosynthesis. And arginine biosynthesis is an essential pathway within Mycobacterium tuberculosis, and currently there are no drugs out there in the market for tuberculosis that have been reported to inhibit arginine biosynthesis. So again, here we have identified a new class of compounds that inhibit an essential pathway, and they have the potential to also overcome virulent factors. One of the reasons why the treatment for tuberculosis has to take a long period of time is that Mycobacterium tuberculosis exists in two physiological states. So you have the fast replicating forms of Mycobacterium tuberculosis. These are the ones that make you feel the sick because they burst the lungs and the rest. Then you have the dormant replicating forms of Mycobacterium tuberculosis. Now, the current drugs out there in the market have activity against the fast replicating forms of Mycobacterium tuberculosis, and they have very little activity against the dormant replicating forms. What that means is that if you get treatment, let's say you get TB treatment for a month, within a month, you will be able to clear off all the fast replicating forms of Mycobacterium tuberculosis, but the dormant ones will still be there. So once you stop treatment after that, you might feel fine, better within the month after you stop treatment. But after the month you stop treatment, you feel sick again. That is because the slow replicating forms of Mycobacterium tuberculosis, they've grown gradually to convert to the fast replicating forms of Mycobacterium tuberculosis that causes you to feel sick. So ideally, to shorten TB treatment, we need molecules out there that can kill both the fast replicating forms of Mycobacterium tuberculosis as well as the dormant one. Unfortunately, there are just few molecules out there that are active against the dormant replicating forms. One of those molecules is metronidazole. It's a common drug that people commonly refer to as Flagy. Metronidazole on its own has shown activity only in vitro on test tube against the dormant replicating forms. In vivo, in animal models, metronidazole has no activity because it's very small, it's not very lipophilic, so it cannot diffuse through the different layers to reach where Mycobacterium tuberculosis is. So our strategy here has been to identify molecules that have activity against the fast replicating forms of Mycobacterium tuberculosis, and they are lipophilic enough, meaning they can be able to permeate to where Mycobacterium tuberculosis is. So we can get those molecules, then attach the metronidazole onto the molecule. So with their high lipophilicity, they should be able to pull metronidazole to the dormant, the fatty tissues where the dormant forms of Mycobacterium tuberculosis reside. So with that idea, we came up with a simple synthetic strategy like this, and generated several of these compounds and evaluated them for growth inhibition against the fast replicating forms of Mycobacterium tuberculosis. To our surprise, these compounds were not having activity as we expected. And worst of it, they had poor metabolic stability, so they break down within 2 to 3 minutes. You don't identify anything out from there. So what we did next was that we selected those molecules, then tried to remove the shift-based moiety there and introduce a tetrazole. Tetrazoles on their own contain a shift base, and in addition, they also contain aromatic character, which give them better metabolic stability than shift bases. So we generated several of these compounds, and we did evaluate them for growth inhibition against the fast replicating forms of Mycobacterium tuberculosis. And most of the compounds had potent activity as we wanted. And the interesting part of this compound class is that we had very interesting structural activity relationship around these rings, ring A and ring B. So what we noticed here was that if you introduce a substitution around the O2 position of ring B, you're going to increase activity. But if you introduce a substitution around the para position of ring B, you're going to lose activity. So for example, if you look at TGF-16, it has a substitution, a fluorine at the O2 position. It has a better activity of 1 micromolar than TGF-6, which has no substitution on ring B. It has an activity of approximately 4. Now, if you remove this fluorine here and put it at the para position to give you TGF-14, what you see there is that we lose activity completely. What that shows is that the presence of a substitution around the para position gives us better activity than substitution around the para position. So, presence of substitution at the O2 position gives us better activity than the para. Next, if we remove aromaticity of the B ring to get non-aromatic, we improve activity by almost 4-fold. If you see, when we move from TGF-6 to TGF-17, we increase activity from 4 micromolar to approximately 1 micromolar. Around ring A also, we realized that we had better activity when we have our tetrazole moiety attached to the para position compared to when we have it at the meta position. If you see, when we move from TGF-9, which has an activity of 2 micromolar, to TG2F1, we lose activity completely. So after identifying very potent molecule, the next thing that we did here was we want to see the drug-like properties of this molecule. So if we take them in vivo, can we get the activity that we are interested in? So we did evaluate them for growth inhibition. After growth inhibition, then we took them for metabolic stability. For most of these compounds, what is this? We realize that they have better metabolic stability than where we started from. So after 30 minutes in the presence of a human liver microsome, these are enzymes that break down molecules in the body, we realize that we still have more than 50% of this molecule present, which is great metabolic stability. Our compounds, they show that they have better permeability because they are log D, the property that measures if they can dissolve in fat, is also good. But the biggest challenge, however, here again, is that we have poor aqueous solubility, meaning our molecules, if they go into the stomach, we will not get them dissolving in the water found in the stomach. And here again, we're still working to address this issue. Our fight against tuberculosis, we've also looked at the things that we have abundant in our environment. And one of those things that we have abundant in our environment is turmeric. Turmeric is a common spice. If you go to Checkers now, you will find it. You go to OK, you will find it. So the major component of the turmeric powder is called curcumin. This molecule, through herbal mixing, has been shown to get some form of activity against the pathogen that causes tuberculosis. But the biggest challenge, however, here is that it breaks down in everything. You expose it to air, it breaks down. You put it in water, it breaks down. And that is one of the reasons why your turmeric powder changes color over time. So our approach here has been, as chemists, we have to identify where do turmeric break down easily. When we identify where turmeric breaks down easily, we have to try to make molecules that look like turmeric, curcumin, but they are not curcumin because they do not have that particular spot where curcumin breaks down. So to do that, we came up with a simple synthetic strategy like this, generated several of these compounds that look like curcumin, but they don't have the spots that break down easily, evaluated them for growth inhibition against Mycobacterium tuberculosis, and we had several of these compounds with most of them showing low micromolar to submicromolar activity, which that is almost 90-fold increase in activity compared to curcumin that we started with. So these compounds compared to curcumin are stable because they have a melting point of over 100, and they were generated under heat, meaning they are stable than curcumin, and they can stay over time without you seeing their color changing. So far, we still engage with these molecules to see to what extent we can take them. Here is where we do what I've been showing you so far. So this is a typical setup of what we do. So what we see there is the fume hood, like what we see as kitchen back home. And we have a new fume hood there, a nice one, thanks to the Vice Dean of Research who gave us those nice fume hoods that we are working with. All right, so beside tuberculosis, our African continent on its own is rife with several other infectious diseases, some of which have been collectively termed neglected tropical diseases. They include Zika disease, human sleeping sickness, leishmaniasis. These are the major ones in that list. The list is too long. They are termed neglected tropical diseases because the main players in drug discovery, the pharmaceutical companies, are not interested in these diseases because they believe that these diseases affect poor people, people who don't have money to buy the drugs. So if they invest their money there, they're not going to get the return that they want. So the fight against these diseases is largely left in the hands of non-profit organizations and the academic community like us. So since these diseases affect the poor of the poorest, the ideal way here is that we have to look at a cheaper way of trying to make potential solutions for these diseases. And when we look around where these diseases arrive, the plants there produce in abundance essential oils. So you can find essential oil from leaves, stems, even flowers. So the major component of essential oil is geraniol. And through herbal mixing, it has been shown that geraniol has some form of mediocre activity against the pathogen that causes human sleeping sickness as well as Jaggers disease. So again here, we use our iterative chemical synthesis to use a naturally abundant substance to see how we can improve it to become something viable that we can use to cure ourselves from the diseases that burden us. So to that end, we carry out a simple synthetic strategy like this and generated several geranoid derivatives, evaluated them for activity against the different pathogens that cause neglected diseases of clinical relevance. So we identified several compounds here that have great impressive activity. The compound of interest here that we selected is JJ6. That is because this compound on its own has activity against the pathogen that causes Jagger disease, the pathogen that causes human sleeping sickness, as well as the pathogen that causes leishmaniasis. What this means is that you can develop this compound to get a single substance that you can use to cure more than 4 diseases. And the most important part here is that these diseases, you can sometimes get them infecting one person. So you can get one person that is sick of Jagger disease as well as leishmaniasis. So it makes it easy to get a molecule that you can give to somebody to cure that person from multiple diseases. In our attempt to look for cheaper solutions for the diseases that affect us, we've also looked at another compound that is naturally abundant in the environment. So you have many plants within our own continent producing the quinolone compound, the alkaloids. So you find this within the stems, the barks of many plants. From this compound class, we've had cures for malaria. For example, chloroquine, quinine, they all came from plants. So, but this compound class has not been experimented or identified as new drugs for neglected tropical diseases. So here again, we carry out our synthetic skills, converted a naturally abundant molecule, generated several of these molecules, evaluated them for growth inhibition against the pathogen that affect our health, and identified several of them with good activity against the interested pathogens. The compound here of interest is CH405. Again, it has potent activity against multiple pathogens. You have it showing activity against the pathogen that causes human sleeping sickness. It has activity against the pathogen that causes leishmaniasis as well as the pathogen that causes Jagger disease. So this is again a broad spectrum agent that can be developed to get multiple effect or multiple usage. The African continent on its own has the potential for economic growth. And one of the drawbacks of the economic growth in the African continent, especially in the beef and milk sector, is a disease referred to as Nangana, so the animal form of sleeping sickness. This disease on its own at the moment is not having an effective cure. And the parasite or the vector, tetanus fly that spread this disease, is prevalent in a very large part of the African continent referred to as the tetanus fly belt. It makes that particular patch of the continent unproductive for anything. Since we do not have an effective cure for this pathogen, it means the vector remains a big challenge to us. So to look for potential treatment for this, we started with a small molecule like this, then divided into left, right, and bottom. So we tried making modification to the left side, and we got KT5, which had sub-micromolar activity. With the aim of trying to optimize the activity, we went further to make modification to the bottom side of the molecule, and we came up with KT7 with 80 nanomolar activity. There is great improvement from 7 micromolar to 80 nanomolar activity. With the ambition of trying to get something better, we tried modification to the right side, and unfortunately, we didn't get anything better. So we went back to our KT7 and tried to characterize it further, trying to see what effect it has on skeletal muscle, the beef part of the animals. We realized that it also has toxicity against the skeletal muscle. This is not ideal for our application because we want to give it to animals for their beef and their milk. So if it is killing the muscles, then we're not going to get the beef quantity that we need. Secondly, we also realized that this compound class, they have poor aqueous solubility, and most of it, they are not stable, so they're going to break down fast. So we went further to optimize this by removing the chemical unit that we realized that can become very unstable over time. And to do that, we generated several other molecules that do not have this Michael acceptor. And we got this kind of molecules and evaluated them for growth inhibition against the pathogen that causes Nangana. So from here, we were able to identify several compounds that have sub-micromolar to nanomolar activity, and we were interested with that. So in summary, we started with KT7, which has 80 nanomolar, and we got KAC7, which has 50 nanomolar activity. That is great improvement from 80 to 50. This compound also is not having toxicity against any normal human cells, which is great improvement from what we saw with the toxicity profile here. The biggest challenge, however, here is that the biggest challenge that we have here with this compound is that the KAC7 is not very stable. So if we put it in the presence of a human, rat, as well as mouse liver microsome, we see that it breaks down within 30 minutes. You have less than 30% of that molecule present. So in the presence of human liver microsome, after 30 minutes, we have just 29% of it remaining, which means it's not good enough. In the presence of rat liver microsome, we have, after 30 minutes, just 35% of it remaining. In mouse liver microsome, we have just 25% of it remaining, which means it is not good enough. Even if we have to mix it with animal feed, it's going to break down before it reaches the blood where the parasites are. Another great compound of interest here is KAC37. This compound, although it has 0.45 micromolar activity compared to 80 nanomolar activity, but submicromolar activity is still good potency enough. This compound has great metabolic stability. So if you look KAC37, in the presence of this metabolizing enzyme, after 30 minutes, we still have more than 95% of this molecule still present. This is great stability, meaning we can get this molecule to stay in blood long enough to do the job that we want. So in summary, we've identified a new molecule that can be added into animal feed to cure animal diseases. Okay, so here is when I joined the group. That was 2019, and this is me there, and this is the group that I joined when I joined with Prof. Lesejale Gwabe. And there is one of my MSc students. Take note of this one. I'll talk about that later. So there is one of the PhD students that we've graduated. There is Dr. Claudia Angula. She's currently now a faculty member at the University of Namibia. And these are master students that we've also graduated. And this year, she's the 1 year that we've also graduated. So she started with us with masters, graduated from masters to PhD, and she's currently here and also in the hall, currently doing a postdoctoral fellow relationship with us. She's a great researcher. Okay, so currently we have a situation wherein a lot of bacteria and fungi out there do not have cure. They're currently not susceptible to any drug out there. What that means is that if you become infected with any of these bacteria or fungi, there is high probability that you are going to die from this bacteria or fungi infection, or you're going to stay in the hospital for just too long time before you get better. So if you get maybe just a simple infection in the lungs, you may realize that within 2 months or so, it's a different story that we get from there. One of the reasons why these bacteria and fungi are difficult to manage is because they've developed a very thick wall around themselves, a very thick and fatty wall around themselves, made up of negatively charged phospholipids. So our strategy, or our own way of trying to overcome this barrier that they've created against them, is that we try to exploit two science concepts. The Coulomb's law, which states that light charges repel. So if you bring positive, you repel. If you bring negative, you repel. But if you bring positive and negative, they attract. And the chemical concept that states like dissolve in like. So if you carry oil and put in water, they're not going to mix. But if you take another water container and mix with another water container, they are going to mix. If you take another oil container and another oil container and mix, they're going to mix. So that is like dissolving in like. So we're using these two concepts. So since these pathogens have a very fatty layer around them, for us to get our molecules passing through them, we need to start with molecules that are fatty in nature. And since they have negatively charged surrounding them, we have to start with molecules that are positively charged. So if they are positively charged, they will be pulled by the negative charges on these pathogens. They attract through charge differentiation, and when they bind through charge differentiation, they use their high lipophilicity, fat nature, to diffuse through these cells. So to do that, we started with very fatty molecules, introduce secondary amines onto these molecules. The essence of the secondary amines is that secondary amines are very basic. They are strong bases, so they can pull protons within their surrounding environment, and by doing that, they become protonated and become positively charged. So we generated compounds of this nature and evaluated them for growth inhibition against these pathogens. Unfortunately, most of these compounds were not active as we envisaged. We only identified 18QNX and 18QNY, which have some mediocre form of activity against methicillin-resistant Staphylococcus aureus, as well as Acinetobacter baumannii. So again, here we came up with the iterative chemical synthesis, which is the basic call for making drug, trying to play around with the different chemical moiety. So we designed a concept like this, then follow up a simple synthetic scheme to generate over 60 compounds, evaluated them for growth inhibition. The target compounds had varied activity, with some of them having very great activity that we are looking for. So we selected a few of the compounds. So for example, if you look at this compound class, several of them have great activity compared to the reference molecules out there. Let's take a situation where we say, for example, this is a methicillin-resistant Staphylococcus aureus, E. coli, Klebsiella pneumoniae, Pseudomonas aeruginosa, Acinetobacter baumannii, Cryptococcus neoformans. So if we take, for example, these two pathogens, Pseudomonas aeruginosa and Acinetobacter baumannii, the reference drug out there is levofloxacin. The activity against this pathogen is 3.6 and 0.9. But if we take our molecules, for example, 37 and 10, the activity against these pathogens is sub-micromolar, meaning the molecules that we have so far have superior activity than what is out there in the market. If you look at Cryptococcus neoformans, this particular fungi was one of the biggest challenges in COVID-19. Most people died from COVID-19 because of co-infection with this particular fungi. If you look at the reference drug out there in the market, it has activity of 8 microgram per ml, while most of our compounds that we've presented here have superior activity, almost more than 30-fold improvement in activity compared to the reference drug out there. Meaning what we have here has superior activity and great promise to overcome the current challenges that we're having with this pathogen. So with this interesting activity, what we did next was to try to establish the drug-like properties of these molecules. So here again, we see that our compounds have great permeability, so they can diffuse through the different membranes to reach the target where we want them. They also have great metabolic stability. So if you look, human, rat, mouse liver microsomes, after 30 minutes, we still have more than 90% of these compounds present, which means these are good molecules that we can take for in vivo studies. The lipophilicity is also good, as we've seen here with the flexibility. The biggest challenge, however, here again remains aqueous solubility. Most of these compounds have a solubility of less than 5 micromolar, with the exception of compound 10 and compound 37. Although the solubility here is not great enough, but it reaches the minimum threshold that we can use for animal studies. And to that effect, we took compound 37 for ex vivo studies. So what we did here is we treated macrophages. These are immune cells that the system uses to fight invading pathogens. They do not have activity against Cryptococcus neoformans. So you can see this bar here represents macrophages infected with Cryptococcus neoformans. So the population of Cryptococcus neoformans remain unchanged in just the presence of macrophages alone. But once we introduce our compound of interest with as little as 0.25 microgram per ml, we begin to see that the concentration of Cryptococcus neoformans drops down within macrophages. This shows great promise here that we can get our molecules active in vitro as well as in intracellular. So the next challenge here will be to take this molecule for animal studies, and that is a big challenge that we have in here now because we need funding. The in vivo study is a big challenge. So far, we've been able, through the iterative chemical synthesis, to generate potential drug molecules that can be used for the treatment of human diseases, including tuberculosis, sleeping sickness, as well as animal disease. We've identified a potential drug molecule that is far, far effective than what is out there for the treatment of Cryptococcus neoformans. Like I said before, there is a big complication during COVID-19. The biggest challenge that we have so far now with this particular compound is that we need assistance from any person that can give us to see whatever we get from it. So with that in mind, I first of all want to say we still, even though I'm giving a presentation here as a professor, it doesn't mean I've stopped working. Tomorrow I will still be in the lab and my life will continue as a researcher. So with that in mind, I will say we still need to continue training postgraduate students, and we still need to generate new knowledge that we can publish in high impact factor journals. And above all, we still have the ambition of trying to develop something that can have application in human health or animal. And to that effect, we will need the support of any person that can give us the support that we need. So for the work that we've done so far, I will first of all want to thank the faculty, Northwest University in general, and the Faculty of Health Sciences. It's been great working at the faculty. We've had, we might not have everything, but we have what we need to do the work that we do. I also want to thank the faculty for financial support in terms of money to do research, in particular the financial support that is given to our students. That if we do not get that support, most of the students will not be able to complete their work and they will not be able to even get the certificate that. So we greatly appreciate the faculty for that. I also want to thank some of the funders, the South African Research, Medical Research Council, National Research Foundation for support. Importantly, I also want to thank collaborators from University of Cape Town. We've been working with an amazing researcher, Prof. Digby Warner, and the technician, Audrey. So I think together with them, we've published several work on Q1 journals. Also want to acknowledge Rhodes University. We started with Prof. Henry Hope. I think from him, we were able to publish important work that people begin to gain confidence with us. Besides that, I also want to thank Rhodes University because I spent 2 years of my life there doing postdoc under Prof. Kanye. That gave me ample chance to experiment on a lot of things. Most importantly, my postgraduate students, they've been the foot soldiers doing the work. We sometimes get mad at each other, but it's just part of the nature that we get to do. Chemistry is never easy, so we have to be hard on each other. And thank you all for listening to me. And like I said, I'm open to people, new ideas, and people who will have anything to help us with funding, connections, anything that can help our ambition come true. Thanks very much.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Goeienaand, dames en here. Dumelang baga etsu. I'm Sonia Swanepoel, and it's my honor to first of all congratulate the Faculty of Health Sciences, Prof. Avi and your management team. This is not the first inaugural lecture that I attend from your faculty, and for creating a conducive environment for your team to grow. And tonight we actually are witnessing that wonderful conducive environment that you and your team are creating for your team members. Now, colleagues, it is a difficult journey to achieve what our professor achieved tonight, the full professorship. It starts in the faculty. So your peers have to evaluate you in the Faculty Promotions Committee. From there you had to do the interview, if you can still remember that. And then we've got the Academic Promotions Committee. And there you've got the deanery. So now you've got the Dean of Engineering. Then you've got the Dean of Humanities. Then Economics. And it's all different disciplines. And now they all sit around a table and they have to evaluate each candidate. Now, I remember at that meetings, it's usually in October, and all the deans come in with their files. It's like they're going to write an examination. It's flags, because they have to present their candidates. And Prof. Avi, well done. Very, very well done. What is wonderful about our university is you don't have to wait for somebody to retire or to resign or maybe pass on, because we at this university, it's actually in your own hands. The criteria is there and it's up to you to achieve it. So we don't have a fixed staff establishment. And there are universities who's got that, but we don't. So you get promoted when you meet the criteria. So, Prof, many hurdles you had to overcome. And we want to congratulate you from the management of the Northwest University. I was wondering while I was listening to your lecture whether tomorrow we're going to read that there was a stampede for turmeric in Potchefstroom. So that's on a lighter note. I remember with the COVID how people started drinking all these traditional and herbs, and it seems they weren't too much wrong about that. Professor, once again, congratulations, well done. Here that it must be recorded. This is then hereby confirmed that Richard Beteck has been promoted from 1 January 2025 to Professor in the School of Pharmacy, Faculty of Health Sciences. Inaugural address, magic bullets, what they are and how they are made. Congratulations once again, and very, very well done. Just stand there. Now, it is custom for us at the university to also hand over this wonderful pen and pencil set. It's handmade. It's a wonderful thing to go and can just allow the procession to go out of the hall.
After the national
Thank you.
anthem, we are going outside.